So today we're going to be talking about our Eclipse in the Garden event on Monday, and recapping the community science projects that our staff and volunteers were involved with that day. And it was just a really cool experience, and it was fun looking back at the data. So I think at least all of us probably know what the eclipse is and how that works, so I'm not gonna go into that. But I will ask y'all if you or what you think about how long humans have been studying and predicting eclipses. Because when I heard the answer, it was a lot longer than I would have suspected. I mean, what do y'all think? Do you think it's a few hundred years, 1,000 years? Um, so there have been many caves and tombs that have been discovered with depictions of circles overlapping each other. And of course, there's maybe no way to really know for sure if those were depicting eclipses, but I thought this was really an interesting find. So between 1400 and 1200 BCE, this is a bone, probably from like an ox or something in China. And there are ancient language being transcribed from there. One of them saying the sun has been eaten, which I thought was just so cool. And I know, yes, people have been able to predict at least, there's different kinds of eclipses. So they were definitely able to predict some of the more reoccurring eclipses. But I just thought this was so interesting that they were able to find this kind of inscription on a bone in China. And then, of course, the last total solar eclipse in Fort Worth was July of 1878. I don't know if any of y'all have seen this picture on the left, but this is from Tarrant County. I believe it's in Fort Worth, and these are 7 astronomers with their devices getting ready to watch the total solar eclipse. The portal to Texas history from this year, there were several newspaper articles talking about people's experiences, and it's so great to see some of these notes taken. I think some of the ones that I really enjoyed, I think this newspaper is an excerpt from the Fort Worth Democrat, from maybe a few days after the eclipse. The moon was the governess of the hour yesterday afternoon. It looked like the common way that they were viewing the eclipse was through smoked glass. And so it said in here that smoked glass was an active demand for several hours yesterday afternoon. And I think either later on in this article, I don't think it's clipped in here, but they were saying to save your smoked glass for the next eclipse. Something about the economy. And what else? I mean, just their descriptions of the eclipse was super interesting. So if you have a chance to ever peruse through the portal of Texas history, there's some cool articles about the eclipse. I tried my hardest. There was a woman named Miss Annie Moore, and it said that she had sketched the eclipse from that day, and I was hoping I'd be able to find that sketch, but I could not find that sketch or anything else about her. So thought this was just a funny comic. I won't read it out loud. But overall, I think we're excited to participate in community science projects for this. And we encourage definitely some of our garden guests to also participate. Just because it's science doesn't mean, if you don't know the science, you can't participate and contribute to the whole of the study of the sun and the moon and all of that. So it was exciting to take the data we did, and some was really exciting, some was not so exciting. Beth, I may come back to you later on and ask you about those flowers. So here are a few of the projects or types of data that we collected for the eclipse on Monday. We participated in the Eclipse Soundscapes project. So my coworker in education, Cheryl Schickadans, she applied for an audio moth device. I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit, to participate in this project. And we were given this audio moth device. And it basically, the goal of this project was to record sound days before, during, and after the eclipse to pick up different sounds throughout that duration of, beginning of first contact, and then through totality and over. We also participated in the Globe Observer project. So Globe Observer has an app, and we, from a few different areas across the garden, we took air temperature data and then also observed cloud and land coverage throughout that time. And we also had a few folks participate in the Sun Sketcher project. And this really was looking at the corona and the outer shape of the sun, because we still don't really know the shape of our sun. I'm sure y'all can guess that it's not, a perfect circle. There's a lot of valleys and all the things, and interesting shapes. So this project was to get data from people all over the path of totality to take pictures of the sun. And then also separately, we were just curious about temperature changing, not even just for Globe Observer, but we took temperature from different parts of the garden as well. So it was interesting to see even the temperature differences in different areas of the garden. We also had some UV probes. We measured the UV levels throughout that time. And then we also paid attention to plant responses and wildlife responses across the garden. So here were our 3 places that we had set up on Monday. So we'll start with a pollinator pathway closer to the Britt building. So Tiana and her husband AJ were there with our volunteer Mary Keller, and then we were all posted up at the pollinator pathway. And then inside the garden, the navy sun you see is the North Vista area. So this is probably where a majority of folks that came to the garden were set up in this big open area. If you've been for concerts in the garden, it's right in there. And then finally, we had our team in the Japanese garden, Rachel and Kay, and they had a great time watching it from the Japanese garden. So we took data points for Globe Observer and the Sun Sketcher app at these 3 locations. And then I just have, at least for us, our start time and end time, and then maximum eclipse from where we were. So the Eclipse Soundscapes project was really easy, because all we really had to do was on Saturday, the Saturday before the eclipse, let me back up. Aaron Flinchbaugh and I scouted a few areas across the garden to look for areas that maybe had fewer noises from human activity. So less traffic noise, less just, human chatting and stuff like that. So we did a few scouting treks throughout the garden the week before, just to find a good location. And we noticed that there really aren't a lot of places in the garden where you don't hear cars at all. We noticed that maybe whenever we're walking the garden, we just kind of tune it out as background noise. However, we did end up finding a spot in the South Woods part of the garden. And then also we chose the Japanese garden as well as another place to put the audio moth. So we had 2 audio moth devices that Aaron deployed on Saturday the 6th before 11 o'clock in the morning. And then yesterday after 5 p.m., I retrieved those. So the 2 audio moths were recording sound from Saturday up until yesterday. And I'll be able to send those SD cards with all of those audio files back to the researchers for them to analyze, and they'll just be comparing the noises from that certain time range on each of the days to see the differences. There's a cricket on their logo because they're particularly interested in cricket sounds during the eclipse and what they're doing during the eclipse. But all of this, this project came about, you'll see on the right-hand side, it's an old paper from 1932, but this was a community science project by William Wheeler during this total solar eclipse. He asked a bunch of people to pay attention to some of the behaviors of animals during the eclipse. And so he was able to get a lot of data during this time. So, and it's not even the first time that people were observing animals during the eclipse. So if you look at the introduction of this paper, even eclipses dating back to the 1500s, they had noted that birds stopped singing during the total solar eclipse. So this is what the audio moth device looks like. It's super small, just like this. So we placed it in a Ziploc bag and then used zip ties to tie it to a tree, a certain side facing out, and then just let it do its thing for the rest of the time. So the green sun on here is in the Southwoods part, and then the red sun is in the Japanese garden. So you can see the green sun. I mean, we tried to pick a spot, kind of in the dead center of the Southwoods area, just to try to not pick up as much sound. But you can see, I mean, we're so close to university. We're so close to the highway. I was able to copy over some of the audio files to my computer and I listened to a little bit of it. You can hear the train, you can definitely hear cars, but you can also hear a lot of birds as well. So I do think that although these audio moths were kind of in an urban setting, I mean, we are green places. We have so many wildlife in our garden. So I do still think it'll be really good data for these researchers whenever they get them back. So here is what that looks like. So here's in our Japanese garden, and then this is the one in the Southwoods. So on to Globe Observer. And I guess, I mean, before I continue, did anyone during the eclipse participate in any of these community science projects or any others that I'm not mentioning? It's totally fine if you're like, I was just there to enjoy the eclipse. The Globe Observer app is used like year-round for people who want to participate. So on Eclipse Day, there actually was an Eclipse button on the app, but through the Eclipse Globe Observer tool, this is where we input our temperature, cloud, and land coverage. And this was every 10 minutes to be taking data. So you can see behind our volunteer Rowan that we had a big table back there with, every 10 minutes, and then we had our columns of temperature, cloud, and land coverage, so that other people participating or at least joining us at the garden was able to see kind of the data that we were taking throughout that time. So here's that a little bit more. We had two different temperature devices that we use. So on the left, this is one that I received for free at the Texas Master Naturalist Conference last year during the eclipse class, because there was that total solar eclipse last year as well. So us at the Pollinator Pathway used this, and then North Vista also used that device. And then we also had these little devices here. It almost looks like a pencil. This was our UV probe. Our education team has been gifted TI calculators over the years, and they come with some really cool kind of add-on things that you can plug in, and the TI calculator will basically be a reader for that device. So we had a few calculators with these different inputs, whether it was temperature or UV. So these were our findings. So each of the lines represents a point in the garden where we were taking this data. So the blue line is the North Vista, red is pollinator pathway, and yellow is the Japanese garden. And then of course, if you remember what time we had the eclipse, you can see where that dip is. And I think, let me actually exit out of this because I wrote what differences we had. So North Vista before the eclipse and then during eclipse time, that was a 14.7 degree difference. Pollinator pathway, we had the highest fluctuation. So ours is the red line, almost 19 degrees difference from beginning, before the eclipse and then during. And then Japanese garden had the smallest difference in temperature change, just barely 10 degrees. So I thought that was interesting that each location in the garden, also experienced different temperature fluctuations and could be a number of factors. I mean, I think at the pollinator pathway, we were kind of in a more open area with a lot of concrete and sidewalk. North Vista, a huge open space with just grass, and there were a ton of people there. It's possible like more heat was trapped in that area. And then versus the Japanese garden, I mean, if y'all have been to the Japanese garden, it is pretty shaded. There's water. So I guess I probably would have guessed that that would have been the smallest difference in temperature. And then here's our UV. So you can see it starts around here, and we did have kind of intermittent clouds throughout the day. I don't know how cloud coverage was where y'all were at. I know we were a little nervous that maybe it would obscure the eclipse that day, but it ended up being a really great day. But again, I mean, you can see it goes all the way down to pretty much zero and then shoots back up once the eclipse ends. So this was pretty cool to see using those UV probes to actually see that go down. I know for me personally, I was just so surprised, even when the moon was about halfway covering the sun, just still how bright it was. Just makes you think how strong the sun is for all of that light still to be shining through, even just being halfway covered. And this is just within that totality zone right here. So you can see it barely gets down to zero, then shoots back up. And this was at the pollinator pathway. So on to our Sun Sketcher app. This is just from their website, but this is out of Western Kentucky University, but they also are partners with NASA. And basically all of this scientific jargon is just saying that they're really interested in knowing and understanding the shape of our sun a little bit more. So once it got closer to totality time, we set up phones on some kind of surface and let the app run, and it basically just took pictures every minute or so of the eclipse, and then it was done. So this was also a super hands-off, just let the app do its thing and get the data that it wants. One of our staff, Natch, created these awesome handouts for us during the eclipse. So this was a little bit more about Sun Sketcher because it was so easy for someone to participate in this project. We made sure to advertise and encourage people to also use the Sun Sketcher app as well. And I don't know about y'all, but I saw some pictures, right after the eclipse, people were showing me, oh, I think, there was a solar flare. You can see these red dots around the moon whenever during the eclipse. And I did a little bit more research, and it actually ended up that these are called solar prominences, but it's still like solar gas, plasma, all the things popping out. So that was kind of cool to be able to see that during the eclipse. I'm sure that others saw that as well. So wildlife observations, the Japanese garden, again, I think there's just it was such a good environment in there. So our team there was really able to get some good notes about the frogs singing. The turtles actually had gone away at some point and then returned after the sun came back out. Um, I tried to put a video in here that I took of the front pond that we have, um, but around this 1:30 time that the Japanese garden folks said that they heard crickets, I was also hearing crickets, frogs, all of those things chiming in the front pond as well. So that was interesting. Now on to plants, because of course we had to look at the plants during the eclipse. I mean, what a perfect way to um, study plant responses. And, are they going to react to the eclipse if it's so brief? I mean, are they going to think it's actually nighttime? Or are they not going to really be fooled, by this brief time of darkness? Because there's so many things that go into a plant's response to either choose to open or close their flowers. Light and temperature does it, the time of day, duration of that light and temperature, other factors like chemicals, maybe predators can all cause flowers to move. So even like looking at herbarium specimens, if y'all have transcribed with us before, you may have come across labels like this where the collectors will note either that the specimen flowers are open at a certain time or already closed at a certain time. So we thought maybe we would collect specimens during this time if we started to see, some serious movement in the flowers, either opening or closing. So this was one example. Oh, and I have the wrong large label up here. But the specimen on the left actually says the corollas were beginning to close at 1:30 p.m. And then I think this one is a yellow-eyed grass. So this collector also noted that some flowers were closed and some were fully open at 8 a.m. So it's important for us to know, when, plants have their own circadian rhythm and why and when do some of their flowers open or close, is just really interesting. So during the eclipse, our living collections manager, Seth Hamby, was kind enough to loan us a few pots of plants from the plant sale that we had. So Nymphaea, Datura, Oxalis, Enithera, and Maranta. Do any of these, I mean, can you see maybe why these plants in particular were chosen? They all either have their leaves or flowers opening or closing at a certain time. Either Datura, for example, opens its flowers at night, gets pollinated by moths, versus the Enithera closes its flowers at night. Same with the Nymphaea, those lilies. So these are all time lapses of a few of these species that I mentioned. I think it's really just amazing that plants will do this. And you don't really maybe notice them as much, as they're moving in and out throughout the day. But that's just what's so cool about time-lapse videos. So that's exactly what we did. We, in two areas, Pollinator Pathway and North Vista, set up a few plants and then set up a GoPro to take time-lapse images throughout the day. So here is our setup here. So you can see we have our Datura, the prayer hands right here, and then an Oxalis species right here. And then here's the GoPro. I'm still waiting on the video for this one. Haven't gotten it back yet. Also, while we were at the Pollinator Pathway, I mean, we had all of these Nymphaea species in this front pond. So this is what they looked like before the eclipse. And this was during the eclipse. So here is one one of those species. And here's another. And if you see, you can see the eclipse and the reflection of the pond, which is kind of cool. And I went back and forth between these images, and I'm convinced that the lilies didn't budge. You know, it's possible maybe just a little bit they budged, but they really did not move at all. And I think these were even, you know, hours apart. I think I took this before even like first contact. Um, so no movement from the lilies during the eclipse. And then here is our time lapse from the North Vista. It's very brief. And again, there's the eclipse. And I watched this a few times over and over. And the only big movement I'm seeing from any of these plants is from this oxalis species here. I can kind of see those leaves moving up and then back down. But really, I mean, not much movement at all. So Beth, I know you mentioned that you noticed some flowers closing. Can you tell me?
Yes,
Can you
a
tell me
little.
more?
I took pictures, so I would say it was probably about 60%, not fully, and then they never reopened. So I need more data. Maybe they just close in the
Yeah,
early afternoon or do that. It
yeah.
was the linum flowers, the flax,
Uh-huh.
um, that I took some photos of. I haven't fully downloaded them yet, and I was
Yeah,
going to put them in iNat. I
that's
did go to
great.
San Antonio for the annular eclipse, and I thought I noticed Solanum horse nettles kind of
Uh-huh.
moving a little bit. But
Yeah,
again, maybe this is just something they do.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. And of course, I know that it's such a brief moment, and I know plants have kind of a longer response time probably for these things. But even with the noticing of the UV changing, I mean, it was still so bright even when the sun or even when the moon was like almost halfway, you know, covering the sun. Um, but I'm glad that you may have noticed something because I mean, we specifically chose these species because we knew that they had this type of movement. So, you know, maybe for another time, focusing on a new set, maybe looking at the lineup more closely. Um, I did see a paper, see a paper, or an article, from what the 2017 total solar eclipse, and I think that they looked at um, the little mimosas, those little sensitive plants, and they noticed that those leaves did close up a little bit. And then some of the other plants that they saw didn't even react at all. So it's just interesting what is more sensitive to the eclipse versus others are like, whatever. So I will say we definitely wish that we had saw a little bit more of a reaction. That was the goal, but this is also still sometimes nothing is still also good data to have. And that is all I have for the presentation today. Um, but I hope for the rest of the time, I'd really love to hear from all of you and maybe some of the things you experienced from where you saw the eclipse, because it looks like we all were a little bit all over. Um, so I'd love to hear from y'all, and you're welcome to unmute yourselves. Can either Alan or Katie talk about Ennis a little bit? I heard all of the stories ahead of time, the slight panic of the influx of guests to Ennis. But I'm assuming if you were at someone's place, then maybe it wasn't too crazy. Okay, Katie says Tradescantia flowers closed. Cool. Hey, that's really cool.
This is Katie. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, it was really great. We weren't in the city, kind of east of Ferris actually, a little bit northeast of Ennis. But we were kind of out. We didn't have any street lights near us, so we didn't see any lights come on. So we got the full experience of darkness out there, which was great. Um, and then kind of
And so,
right as the eclipse happened, I noticed a bunch of frogs piped up, and they
yeah,
were kind of very vocal for like a minute or so, and then they quieted down again, which was strange. Birds continued to sing, not as loudly,
mhm.
but still some chatter. And then after we did another little hike around, and that's when I noticed that the majority of the Tridescantia flowers had closed. So that was really neat. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm assuming since you were probably really out there, you guys saw some good stars, maybe.
There was a planet or star kind of to the beneath the sun and the
Hmm.
moon, but
Hmm.
that was really, I don't know, we didn't really see a whole lot of star action, not that I remember. What about you,
Yeah.
Alan? Do you remember seeing any stars?
No, I think, we saw Venus and Jupiter. Somebody had figured out that was the planets that we were seeing that were
Yeah.
clearly visible. I didn't see any stars per se, but
And how was the cloud coverage over there?
well, it was pretty cloudy up
Mm.
until we got right up to the totality, and then it literally cleared. It was perfectly clear for
Yeah.
maybe a
What?
little hazy, but
Hmm.
it
What great
was,
luck.
I mean, it was great for me. And I didn't realize this until I heard something before the eclipse that once you go into totality, you don't really need the glasses.
Yeah.
So I pulled out binoculars and you could clearly see those, uh, not solar flares, but whatever you called them earlier.
Yeah, like
Prot-
Bailey's beads and some of
yeah,
those like project prominences and stuff like that. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Um,
Well,
I
and
see.
and we had all met there at 9 in the morning to do
Hmm.
a nature walk. I mean,
Oh,
John
that's
Wiltz has
wonderful.
got a very diverse habitat. It drops almost 500 feet from up by the house down into the river bottom,
Oh,
creek bottom. So there's a lot of different plants.
yeah. That sounds like it was a good location to be. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Um, I'm seeing Sue Frary said we saw Venus and Jupiter too. It was not full dark. Um, let's see, Jean, quietness. Oh my gosh, yeah. And the colors of the landscape. Yeah, I had to like make a mental note. I'm like, okay, looking up is really cool, but I also should be looking around like to the horizon too. Um, and right, yeah, on the pollinator pathway, all of, the nighttime lights came on. So it was just really cool.
Well, and Sue sent several of her fellow master naturalists from the uh, Indian Trails chapter
Yeah,
were there for, and we had an astronomer that set up the scope so we could actually see.
that is awesome. I'm glad. I know a lot of people in the garden at the North Vista really had their official telescopes and everything, all the setup.
Yeah.
Um, well, I'm glad you at least had like someone there to tell you all the things. Um, Beth saw the 2017, saw more stars. Wow. And where in Beth, the 2017, where were you for the 2017 one? Was that also here?
We saw a partial here, and we went up
That's
to
right.
St. Louis, and um, the whole sky was clear, and so there was a lot more to see in the sky. It
Yeah.
is definitely more dramatic. But yeah, like others, I just saw planets this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I mean, definitely didn't see tons and tons, but I noticed a few. Um, Sue, about a 10-degree temperature drop too. The horses were confused. Oh my gosh. That's funny. I know someone said they saw it, and one of our volunteers this morning said they were just at their house and the neighbor's rooster was really going off at that time. Just very cool. And I think I'm still just not over this image from 1878. I mean, when people say this is like a once in a lifetime event, I mean, they're not lying. Unless you're just, you make an effort to like go wherever the path of totality is. I know I'm already trying to convince my husband for us to make an excuse to go to Europe in 2026 for that one. Because that would be really cool. So I eventually, kind of a lot of the stuff that I talked about today, I'll be posting on a web page on the website. That way people can see, I mean, I'll put more pictures from the event. And I hope that I just need to figure out what kind of program I can use for these large audio files from those audio moth devices. But I mean, I'd love a way to be able to see some of the differences in noises across the days that we had those devices, because that seems like a really interesting project. But we may hear more from them in the coming weeks as they get those devices or get the SD cards back. If y'all are interested, I'll just share with you. Well, this is at least the web page, and I'm pretty sure this is kind of where they'll be posting their. Oh, Sue, what'd you say there? Sorry, Kaleidoscope light for audio files? Okay. Okay. And you saw one in the 70s? That's amazing. Okay, so kaleidoscope light, do you think that will be okay for a large file? It's like several hours of audio, so I'm a little, okay, cool. I will definitely try that out. Yes, I wanted to make sure that we copied that data for ourselves. Monitoring bats with it. So, what's cool about this project, I mean, these audio moth devices that they gave to us, we get to keep those. All they want back are those SD cards. And so we're already thinking about other ways that we can use these devices across campus. There's so many different projects going on, which is why I just love where we are. There are a few professors at TCU that have monitored bats. So you said bats on campus. And then there are other researchers, I think it's still either with TCU or UTA, that are measuring soil moisture in the South Woods. So around that area where we had the audio moth, they have been monitoring like soil moisture, and I believe the research has something to do with, by the time like the rain falls, and it gets soaked up by trees. I mean, what's the timeline for that? Which is pretty interesting. So I just love that our campus, it's obviously a beautiful garden, but it's also been a really cool opportunity to collect data and learn a little bit more about the garden, because I think we're in a unique place to be in such a busy city full of concrete, but we're just this green space that actually is a refuge for quite a lot of wildlife. Wildlife acoustics. Okay. Sue, you are saving me. I'm gonna figure this out. So, if y'all want, I am happy to maybe once I get some of this figured out, I will send another email out through the Armchair Botanist emails, and just send the recording for this, and then also the web page where all of the data will be. And hopefully I can have some cool audio as well to share. I don't know. We'll see if this works, Sue. Thanks for sharing. Does anyone have anything else they want to share today? I know it's 15 minutes till, but this is all I had for today. I appreciate y'all hopping on. Hi, Sue.
Wildlife Acoustics does sound monitoring,
Yeah,
birds, and a little bit of everything. We use their software for bats,
cool.
and it will actually identify what the call is. People
Wow.
use it for birds all the time.
And do you use like something like an audio moth device
Yeah,
or what do you,
yeah.
okay.
We use a bat because their calls are beyond our hearing
Yeah,
range. There's a
yeah.
special recorder for bats, but they also have recorders like Audio Moth.
Mm-hmm.
And the Audio Moth files are probably WAV files.
Yes.
And Kaleidoscope will pick up that file and show you the audio picture of it.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly what I want to see because
Yeah.
I mean it's such a each of the files, I think there's like 1 or 2 for each day.
Yeah.
And they're of course however many hours long.
We monitor bats for a full week,
Oh wow.
and
Oh,
then
that's so cool.
load up the stuff. One thing is Kaleidoscope Light is free,
Mm-hmm.
but it won't auto ID
Mm-hmm.
the call.
I see. So that would be like a, something additional you'd have
Well,
to pay
there's
for.
Kaleidoscope Pro,
Mm-hmm.
which is about $350 a year.
Ooh.
But that will automatically ID whatever is that's in your sound file.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. Maybe I can convince the garden to pay for something like that. If they
Well,
want, more data like that. I
yeah,
mean,
look at their
beyond.
wildlife acoustics training is very good.
Cool.
And go to their training stuff for Kaleidoscope Light. There's a little bit of a learning curve for it, but it's really very cool.
Yay, I'm excited. I hope it helps. Because I'd love to share that, but with such big files, I'm like, I'm not gonna put that on the website and have somebody listen through 7 hours of sound.
So what you can do is put it into Kaleidoscope Light and then play it
Hmm.
during the meeting
Yeah.
on
Oh,
your
absolutely.
laptop. Yeah.
That is exciting. I'm looking back. Denise, you were in the middle of Dallas. And was it packed? I mean, the video footage I saw from Dallas, it's just amazing that so many people are interested in, viewing this really cool thing, these huge planets, do their thing, and there's nothing we can do about it. It just makes you feel really small.
I was just off a Northwest Highway and there was hardly any traffic, and that was kind of eerie. And then when the street lights came on, that was eerie.
Yeah,
Too bad it was so quick though.
I know. I know. I am very jealous of the 4-minute totality folks, for sure. Katie, I see, yeah. I'm very glad that all of y'all got to have such a great experience. And thanks for joining me to recap this. Okay, Sue, I was just making sure you saw Katie's message. What a cool project. I'd love to hear about that project sometime, Sue. More about that. All right, y'all. Well, I'm gonna wrap us up, and I just want to say thank you again for hopping on this Thursday. And I hope to send out an email with a page where you can see all of this data. So thanks. Appreciate all of you and have a good Thursday, and we'll see you next month.